Welcome back to SciByte, everybody, where we explore the mysteries of the infinite universe and all the tools and technology that science is using to get to the bottom of it. For the purposes of today's episode, you may call me Mr. Question. We're doing our Q&A, and I am Jeremy. Joining me on the Skype line is Heather.
Hi guys. This week on SciByte, we're going to throw some science at old wives' tales and see what sticks. Plus, we're going to take a look at the science behind some of them and what makes them true, false, or somewhere in the middle.
Yep, that sounds like a great show to me. Now, most of you know we asked for your questions, several weeks ago. We've tabulated some of the best ones, at least the ones that we thought were the best. I know we're a little elitist about that, but we got to choose. And then we did all our research, though. There's science behind the answers here. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and hop straight into the first one. Now, I'm going to be asking all the questions, and Heather's going to be throwing the science at your faces. So duck. Okay, here we go with the first one. Do you really catch a cold by getting cold?
No. Unfortunately, or fortunately, you don't. Colds and the flu is caused by a virus. Now, the origins of this kind of makes sense. I mean, the flu and cold are seasonal, and they tend to act up more in the winter when it's cold. But it's probably more due to the fact that when it's cold, everyone's inside, they're closer together, it's easier to transmit these things.
And the kids are in school. So there's more and more social interaction going there among those kids, those filthy, filthy kids.
Yes. There is some scientific evidence that proves that these might be more easily carried in the air in cool, dry air as well.
So as some of you might know, the humidity of the air, it's when the air is colder, it holds less moisture. So you're saying that when the air is colder, when it's drier, it can potentially carry these viruses more effectively?
Possibly. It's one experiment that I've seen kind of mentioned casually places where they haven't conclusively proved it yet, but it's a tangible thought that the cool, dry air could be also having a part to do with it.
Now, when you do get cold, if you get cold enough that you've actually been subjected to hypothermia, this does have some effect on your immune system, though, doesn't it?
Yes. That if you are in actual hypothermia, that can lower and suppress your immune system.
And what's the actual definition of hypothermia? That's just when your internal body temperature drops below normal, right?
When your internal body temperature drops below a certain point. I don't recall it off the top of my head.
Right.
But it is a very specific set of things that, your organs start shutting down. Now, if you're just cold, I've actually seen some studies that say if you're just cold, it may actually heighten your immune system slightly. Like your body knows that stuff's out there and it might need to prepare.
Wow. Well, so there's so many misconceptions about the fact that a cold leads to cold.
Yes, and there's a lot of things going on that it's hard to really pinpoint down what's going on.
Now, I have a question that nobody actually sent in. This is just one that I've come up with. But since we're talking about the common cold, what about the old adage that there is no cure for the common cold? Is there truth to that?
There is truth. There is no known cure or anything that shortens the duration. Now, some things work for certain people, but it's not scientifically, conclusively proven in any given study that's work wide range. If something works for you, keep trying it. If it makes your symptoms less hardy, then go for it. But there's nothing scientifically proven that will shorten or lessen the duration of the cold.
So most over-the-counter remedies that you'll receive, or even, old wives' tales remedies that you might take for the common cold, really just treat the symptoms by and large, which there's nothing really wrong with that. Feeling better is better, right?
Feeling less miserable is better.
Yeah. Now, on the same vein as colds, let's talk a little about flu, which is actually short for influenza. You guys have probably heard of this. Is actually a pretty widespread plague. I don't want to go into all the bad news about the flu, but I do want to know, because it is also a common term, stomach flu.
Yes.
Is there such a thing?
Well, there is such a thing, but it's not actually the flu. It is, it's not an actual flu virus. It's just gastroenteritis. It is a problem with your stomach. People just call it the flu, the stomach flu.
But it has no real relation to the virus that causes the flu.
No, there is no connection, no direct connection to the actual flu virus.
Okay. Now, I've actually heard that most cases of stomach flu are really just food poisoning, but we didn't look into doing all the research on this. So let's move on. I have another question here sent in by another viewer here on the same subject, sort of, on the cold. Do you really lose most of your body heat from your uncovered head?
This one is not quite as straightforward. The answer is sort of, or not really.
Now,
kind of at the same time.
do we have any information on exactly where this particular misconception may have began?
Yes. In the 1970s, the U.S. Army Survival Guide actually had in there, cold survival, that you lose 40 to 45% of your body heat through your head, or you can lose.
Mm-hmm.
But this comes from a 1950s experiment that they had people in Arctic survival suits, except they didn't have their head covered. So they're all bundled up and their heads exposed.
Of course you're going to lose most of your body heat from your head when you got nothing covering your head.
Half of your body heat that you lose is going to come from your head.
Obviously. So,
but if you're just in a swimming suit, not half of your body is being lost through your head. Maybe more on the lungs of 10%.
Because it really comes down to surface area.
Yes.
In fact, on that subject, let's get into a little bit of heavy, hardcore math here and cover the subject of thermodynamics, which is basically, now we're going to do this very on a basic level, but thermodynamics is basically the transfer of heat from one medium to another. Now, so we'll just go cover this pretty briefly just to explain exactly why it is that you do lose body heat and why it is not that so much could be coming out of your head. So cover for us, if you wouldn't mind, Heather, some of the basic definitions behind thermodynamics.
Sure. Thermodynamics is the fundamental mode of heat transfer. Like you said, it's mainly in 4 ways. Conduction or diffusion, which is when 2 objects are in physical contact with each other. Convection, the transferring heat from one object to its environment, or a fluid, which includes gases.
Convection can also refer directly to fluids within fluids. Transferring their heat around.
Yes, that is correct. Or gases to gases.
Right.
There's also radiation and mass transfer. Mostly with the body, we're talking about conduction and convection. If you're actually standing on something cold or leaning against something cold, then there's physical contact, there's conduction.
People have probably experienced this in your everyday life. When you touch something cold, that part of your body feels like picking up an ice cube. When you put that down, your fingers feel cold because the heat has been transferred from one object to the other.
Yep, because the universe wants to be at one temperature.
Right.
So it wants to just balance everything out. So heat wants to transfer from one area to another. Everything wants to be kind of at the same excitement level.
So in the case of this particular experiment that we were talking about, the fact that these poor subjects had nothing covering their heads when they were subjected to extremely cold temperatures, they probably didn't have anything in contact with their heads that was cooling them off. So that was conduction, right?
Conduction, yes.
So primarily through the course of convection, their head was interacting with the cold
air, to the cold wind. It also has a little something to do with thermoregulation, which, if your hands get cold, the blood vessels constrict. There's nothing super important in there. Your body says, whatever, we can lose the hands and still survive.
Right.
But you can't really lose your head and survive. So the blood keeps pumping and trying to keep that hot.
Right. And the reason that you can't lose your head is because that's where all the science is done, right there inside your brain. In fact, I would like to kind of sidetrack from our Q&A this episode to touch back on one that we talked about in our introduction. When we brought up the concept of the Q&A, we went over the old wives' tale that humans only use 10% of your brain. And we talked about how that's not true, that there have been studies and MRIs and brain scans that prove the opposite. But in response to that, one person in our, I think it was on the YouTube comments, brought up the concept of folks that lose a portion of their brain, or, we mentioned through strokes, but there are also actual reasons that you could have surgery performed on your brain that would either cut portions of your brain out or disable portions of your brain. And those people seem to still live relatively normal lives for the most part. So I thought that we might take a little bit of time and go over a little bit more of that information in some detail.
Sure.
Where should we start here? Maybe with the concept of a hemispherectomy?
Yes, that is right. It is when roughly half of the brain is surgically removed. Generally, this is when you're treating debilitating seizures. I mean, these are seizures that completely interfere with the life and well-being of a person.
So primarily for people that just cannot function in their normal everyday life, and even if they risk losing some of their functions, being without seizures is worth the price.
Yeah, it's interrupting your bodily functions to a point that the detriments of losing that part of your brain sort of are outweighed by the benefits of not having the electrical stimulation, or in some cases, trauma or virus or something that is one part of your brain is just interfering with the rest of your brain and you can't function.
Or your very life. I mean, the chat room has mentioned that this is sometimes done for extreme cases of brain cancer as well.
Yes, indeed. Now, there are the core part of your brain stem.
Mm-hmm.
It technically is sort of in that half, but they leave that. They don't touch that.
So we're really just talking like, well, what most people would interpret as the gray matter, right?
Yeah, the gray matter part.
Right.
And these surgeries are, unless of cases of cancer or things that happen later in life, most of the hemispherectomies that you see them being normal lives are kids. And there's still a lot of neuroplasticity. So when other parts of your brain can take over, sort of lift up what another part of your brain would usually do.
Oh. So in cases where there's still neuroplasticity, is that the term?
That is correct.
Now, I've been told in my growing up days that, like the left side of your brain controls the right side of your body and vice versa. So if they remove your left brain, don't you then go numb in your whole right side of your body?
Sort of. There are cases where there's still some small, fine motor function or, there's not a lot of ability in that side of your body. But the younger the kid is, the more likely it is that, depending on the physical therapy and just the kind of randomness that is the brain, they can actually still function. They can still move that arm. It just may not be as dexterous as the other arm.
That's fascinating. We might need to do a full episode on the brain at some point. At least I know that there's not a lot. There's still quite a few mysteries out there in terms of science and the brain. But what about like memories and personality and things like that? Are those generally affected by this kind of operation? Or
amazingly enough, the surgery has no apparent effect on personality or memory.
Wow. That implies some pretty interesting things about brain chemistry right there. That, again,
and
I think we should
communication in amongst your brain itself.
Now, speaking of communication, though, aren't the speech centers of your brain primarily on, is it the left side for most people?
Yes, it is the left side. People who have the left side removed do tend to have more problems with speech. Now, if it's the younger the child is, the less they appear to have those problems when the brain is super flexible and just creating.
All comes back to neuroplasticity and the ability for your brain to adapt to those major modifications.
Yes.
So I guess the bottom line is that there are indications that we might use all of our brain, but not for everything. Like in the case of memory and personality, those don't appear to... Wow, weird stuff. Okay, I definitely think we should circle back on that in a future time. So let's move on to the next question here, though, that somebody sent in. I think this one is actually a lot of fun because I was told this growing up. Do you get cramps from swimming right after you eat?
No, our mothers lied to us. We had the best of intentions, but we went out for swimming. The thought of a toe touching the water and down to the bottom of the pool you go... Wrong.
I actually remember a cartoon from my younger days. I think it was on Nickelodeon or something about a guy eating a big sandwich and then running out into the water and all of his limbs tie up into pretzels. And he just bobs around and then sinks. Yeah. It's like some sort of super... Okay, but there's no scientific evidence to support
the origins to this one probably go back to the 50s and 60s when water safety wasn't quite what it is today. The lifeguards would go off and eat their lunch, and there'd be nobody watching the kids in the pool. Mom and Dad probably wanted an hour that they could just, relax and not worry about little Timmy drowning in the bottom of the pool.
So they just wanted to be able to eat their lunch in peace.
Yes, and they're like, no, you can't go into the water. So those kids are going to wolf down their food and be like, can I go? Can I go? No, you must sit.
Well, let's talk a little bit about cramps, since we're on this subject. I mean, do we have any information here about, well, everybody knows what a muscle cramp is. It's basically like a tensing of the muscle, an uncomfortable muscle contraction that is involuntary and occasionally extremely painful. Yeah. Now, is there anything that we know about these that we could tell people that, like, things that do actually cause muscle cramps or can be used to alleviate them?
They can be caused by a variety of things. Muscle fatigue, low sodium, low potassium. So while nothing has been conclusively able to prove that this is the cure-all, there's a handful of things that we do know tend to help, depending on what was the cause. Alternately, tensing and relaxing your muscle, massaging it, heat, stretching.
I've also heard that Gatorade and stuff that has electrolytes in it can help, as well as bananas.
Yes.
Because you mentioned low potassium.
Yes. Banana, orange juice, water, electrolytes. Probably a good idea, especially if you've if this is coming on from an exercise regimen, it's certainly possible that you're not hydrating enough.
Yeah, and
So,
really, you know
including
what?
all of
Just
those,
a general, good idea in general.
Oh, yeah.
So, what about food? I mean, is there any basis to, aside from the fact that we think that this might have originated because parents wanted some time off from watching their kids in the pool, is there any scientific evidence to support this at all? Like, for example, could it be possible that because right after you eat, it engages your digestive systems and blood flow to the stomach? I mean, is that...
Well, yeah, there is some increased blood flow to your stomach, and your stomach is kind of churning the food a little bit. But really all your stomach is doing is having a little ball of hydrochloric acid sit in there and crunch your food up a little bit more. It's really no direct effect on your external limb muscles.
Yeah, and really, generally speaking, your body is a fantastic contraption that can probably handle digesting and walking around at the same time. And swimming is not that much more strenuous than walking around, really. In fact, in some ways, less, because you don't have to deal with gravity as much. Yeah.
I mean, if you don't think anything of, eating while on a long, run or a marathon or a bike.
There's nothing magical about the fact that you're floating in water that's all of a sudden going to cause your limbs to turn into pretzels.
No.
Like that old cartoon shows.
Yes.
Okay, so we have one more question here, and since we're on the talking on the subject of bellies, we had somebody actually sent us in a question. There's an old wives' tale that says, if your belly is round, then you're going to, this is for pregnant women, if your belly is round, you're going to have a girl. And if it's more like an oval or a football, then you're going to have a boy. Now, I love this kind of thing because you got to figure that there's, at some point, there must have been some truth to this, but in general speaking, is there anything here that we can pin the nail on here and say yes or no?
If you're talking about specific body types or ethnic cultures, then there might be something to that, girls' babies tend to lay this way or boy babies tend to lay that way. And there'll be a lot of evidence this or that way. But as a whole in the world, there's so many body shapes and so many different things that can happen. There's nothing that's really going to say it. You don't quite have a 50-50 chance of having a girl or a boy. Slightly larger chance of having a boy, but not by much.
Is it like 48-52, something like that?
Yeah, roughly. Just a little over.
Okay, let's go on to the next little myth here that we're going to bust. Although this is not Mythbusters. I'm not infringing on their copyrights at all. Please don't sue me.
Nope.
Okay, so the next question is, reading in dim light or sitting too close to the TV, can this damage your eyes?
To the delight of all who wish to sneak in those extra few minutes of reading, no.
Yay!
Reading in dim light will probably cause some eye strain after a little while, after everyone who's tried to use that last little bit of their flashlight knows. But that's really just dealing with the muscles that focus in your eye, and they're trying to open up your iris wider so they can get all the light they can and focus on tiny little text. But that's really all it breaks down to.
It's a short-term strain, if anything.
Yes.
It won't cause any long-term damage, basically.
No.
Right? So, is there any way that, I think we mentioned in our episode about the sun that staring at the sun can damage them, but
yes,
that's pretty much it, isn't it?
Well, there are certain other things. It's the radiation, so that's brightness. You don't want to look at an arc welder at all.
You mentioned radiation. Is there any sort of emissions from standard televisions that could potentially, I realize that they must be safe for in-home use, otherwise it wouldn't be any big deal, but let's say you sit in front of your television like 6 inches away from it for 4 weeks straight without blinking. Extreme situations here. Is there anything that could potentially cause damage at that point even?
Well, if you're not blinking, then that might cause damage to your eyes.
But again, that's just a matter of keeping your eyes moisturized.
Yes.
Yeah.
But again, Mom was doing her best when she said you're going to break your eyes sitting that close to the TV. But really, it breaks down to your head's in the way.
Yeah, it does. Is there anything to do with televisions or computer monitors or anything like this that could lead to long-term damage or long-term strain or anything like that? I've actually been told that reading from too close up or staring at your computer monitor too much can cause nearsightedness, which is technically speaking a form of permanent damage. Your eyes don't focus as well as they could.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's any evidence that conclusively proves that. Whether, the muscle that is focusing your eye can actually change the shape of your eye, which would be the reason why you have nearsightedness.
Right.
But, every once in a while, if you're working at your computer, at least once an hour, you probably want to look away, let your eyes focus on something far away or at a different distance and kind of look around, let your eye wander.
Because even if it won't cause long-term strain, short-term strain can be painful.
Yes.
It can cause headaches. It can cause all sorts of irritation, and you don't want to have to deal with
that. In a few moments out of every hour to keep from having that so you can get through, so it's one less thing to worry about at your work day or while you're gaming even. Probably a good idea.
Now, I do want to mention CRTs. We don't really see so many of these anymore. Most of the world, at least first world that can watch us on the internet, has probably switched over to flat screens of some sort, either LCDs or plasmas, for both their computer monitors and their televisions. But some folks might not be aware unless you've seen a CRT filmed. Now, many of you probably have, and just kind of, that's the way a CRT looks when it's filmed. But what you're actually seeing is the refresh rate. The flicker is caused by the refresh rate, which is actually, generally speaking, is faster than most people can actually see with their eyes and actually cognitively recognize. But that flicker is still there.
Yeah, and it can cause some eye strain as well. Exactly what refresh rate it is, I'm not quite sure that there's a definitive, 60 is and 61 isn't.
Right.
But
generally speaking, it's basically if you're using a CRT monitor or television of any type, if the refresh rate is too low, it can cause more eye strain than usual just because even though you don't see the flicker, your eyes are attempting to adjust for that. That extra dimness that comes up every 100th times every second or whatever it is. So keep that in mind. And it's one more reason to get out there and spend your money on a new LCD or plasma. Go tell your wife. Go tell your wife. She'll totally go in. Tell her it's for science.
Yeah, and totally do it with an affiliate link.
Yeah, we totally got those. Okay, that's actually all the great questions that we have covered for this week's episode for the Old Wives' Tales. But we're going to be doing Q&A segments on a pretty regular basis, and we already want to pitch another one to you. Heather, why don't you tell people what the next one's going to be all about?
The next Q&A is going to be crazy science questions.
Crazy! What kind of stuff are we looking at here? Like, is it just stuff that they don't understand, or how crazy do we want to get?
I've already had a few questions ask me about black holes, or someone saw a video of a strawberry floating in a magnetic field and kind of wondering how that happened. So something you've maybe seen, you just don't understand, and you're like, whoa, what was that?
Right.
Look at a scientist making that work.
Okay, that sounds great. I think that, and yeah, just like you said, we already got a few for this episode, so we're going to use those in Crazy Science Questions Q&A. Yep. Now, just so you guys are aware, I do want to let you know that the next week, as you're watching this, we're going to be taking a week off from SciByte because Jupiter Broadcasting is going to be at PAX Prime 2011, and we're hoping to roll out many, many videos over the course of that weekend, which is going to interrupt our whole editing schedule, including what we would usually use for time to put SciByte together. So we're going to have to be taking a week off from that. But when we do come back, oh boy howdy, we got another scientific brain bender for you. Heather, tell it. Lay it on them.
Put your brain buckles on for quantum mechanics.
We're really going to do this. Quantum mechanics.
We're going to do our best.
I've already started my research, watching some documentaries and stuff like this to make sure that I understand as much as I can understand without having an actual degree in this stuff. So I'm going to be relying on Heather, who I think actually studied quantum mechanics in her college days.
Maybe had a class on it.
Yeah, so, whoa, that's going to be a good one. I know that we've had a lot of questions about some quantum mechanics stuff that is coming in through our SciByte email address, which go ahead and lay that on them so that they know where to send their Q&As and everything.
SciByte at jupiterbroadcasting.com.
And you can also leave any questions that you might have for Heather or myself or just anybody that watches SciByte over at jupitercolony.com, which is our forum. And if you want to get in touch with either of us, you can do so via Twitter. I am at JBJeremy.
And I am at JB_MarsBase.
And that's pretty much it. If you can't manage to get a hold of us after all of that, then you're just not trying. So join us again next week, everybody. Actually, no, sorry, not next week. The following week for quantum mechanics. Oh boy, strap in for that one. And then the following week after that might be our next Q&A. We might get into it that quickly. All right, well, we'll see you all then, everybody. And until then, I don't know, something clever. I'll end the show with something clever, right?
Yeah.
Where we explore the mysteries of the universe and all the science and all the... That's not right. So if this show sucks, I will take responsibility.
Aw. Another gentlemanly thing.
But that also means I can make as many faces at you that I like. You'll never know.
Nope.
You need more cleavage from me, Snickers? Okay. Undo a button here.
Now you're all jealous that you don't have this stream covered up, aren't you? Huh?